Well, it's been more than a week, and we've got a lot of catching up to do. News from Hanoi and news from the States. All this and more today on Jinka Jabo. Out of Minnesota from deadstate.org, a prankster put Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi as the image of Jesus Christ in a Latter-day Saints program. So I think that's kind of funny. A Latter-day Saint church in Minnesota was on the receiving end of a prank that made its way to the headlines of a local news outlet this Tuesday, and it has to do with the fact that Ewan McGregor's portrayal of Obi-Wan Kenobi in those god-awful Star Wars prequels looks a hell of a lot like the classic depictions of Jesus Christ. And it does fit in pretty well. I mean, it's kind of amusing having Obi-Wan there. I'd say there is a little bit more legitimacy to the Jedi and the Force than there is to the Mormon religion. I haven't talked about Mormonism, but sort of like Islam, sort of like many other spiritual paths. It's one path that I did look down at one point. I remember, I think I was in college, and they came to my door, and this was during the time that Ken Jennings, the Jeopardy superstar, I'm really dating myself here, but he is this man, this Mormon man, very devout Mormon who just knew everything about trivia and won more than $1 million or something. I forget the exact total on Jeopardy, but he became a trivia superstar. And the Mormons came to my door and they handed me the book and they said, please just read this book and pray about it and we'll come back. And I said, you know what? I will. I'm going to pray about it. And so I took the Book of Mormon and I read just the parts they told me to read. Anyone who's been visited by Mormons knows that they just give you a few verses. And so I read them and I prayed on them. And this was at a time when I was going to church quite a bit. I think a Christian Science church or a Baptist church or something. But I was very deeply involved in Christianity. And so I thought, maybe these guys are right. Maybe there is something to this religion. Like it's said in that South Park episode. Maybe there is something to this. The people seem very happy. They're all sober. They're all athletic, they're all just full of life and vitality. Maybe I do need to explore this religion. But I prayed on it exactly as they said, and well, I got the answer very resolutely in my heart, almost to the point, I think I recall waking up at one point and just saying no, or having the word no breathed into me. So they came back the next day or whatever, I invited them. And I said to them, yeah, I did pray about it, and I did get a very clear voice from the Holy Spirit, from God, saying that this stuff isn't true. And they were shocked by that. They're like, oh, well, usually people, if they go through the extent of reading the book and reading what we tell them and praying on it, usually they say yes. But I said, well, I mean, I'm sorry. I've even had a few dreams since then where maybe in the end I did just accept it no matter what. And I became a Mormon, and I was wearing the suit and tie, and I was just living a very, I don't know, I guess you would call it a conformist lifestyle, something much different than this kind of beatnik Taoist thing that I came up with on my own years later. Things could always be different, but that doesn't mean they'll be better, right? I met some Mormons, and they're nice guys, and I like the culture and everything, but it is a bit authoritarian. And I've been to Utah. I've seen the temple in Salt Lake City, but we didn't go inside. But one thing that impressed me about Salt Lake City is that the government buildings were all raised higher than the temple, as to show that the government was in control and that it wasn't about the Mormons, even though the Mormons are the majority of the population there. It's really a strange, interesting culture. And I do have appreciation for it. But at the same time, I do find this amusing that they got Obi-Wan Kenobi, the young Obi-Wan, from the really bad prequels. I mean, I don't really like the Star Wars movies much anyway. I mean, kind of. I like the original. I think the first Star Wars, as in the fourth Star Wars, is the best one. But, yeah, it's just funny to see him depicted as Jesus. He does kind of look like Jesus. Obi-Wan is kind of a Jesus figure. And, of course, it's all fabricated nonsense. And that's sort of what you learn when you study really the history and the ideology of, well, not so much the ideology or the theology and everything, the philosophy of it is a whole different camp. But if you study the history, strictly the history of the Mormon Church, it's quite disturbing, you know, because Joseph Smith was a trickster. He was treasure hunter. He used dowsing rods and divination and all sorts of things. And long before he came up with the golden plates that were supposedly buried in, was it New York State by the angel Moroni, before he found those plates, which no one has seen, or those who testified that they saw them later changed and said, no, we were just under pressure to say that we did. They redacted their witness, which they still put on the cover of every Book of Mormon. But he was known for just being into the occult and everything. He was a member of the Freemasons, and the Freemasons follow some kind of occult shtick. I'm not sure exactly what that is. And he came up with polygamy for the Mormons, which they later got rid of. And I remember hearing that his wife was very upset when he said that he wanted to take on other wives. She felt heartbroken, you know, because marriage, at least in the Bible, it says it's a union between two people. But he was looking at it as, you know, King Solomon, Old Testament sort of thing, back when kings had multiple wives and so on. And they later got rid of that, just like they got rid of the racism, inherent racism. They said the sons of Ham, I guess they called them, the black people, they're cursed, and holiness is whiteness. But they got rid of that in the 70s, around the time that former Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, who is a member of the church, he was in the church when that happened, and he says that when he got the news that they accepted black people as full members, he pulled over in his car and started crying and all that. I mean, I'm just looking at it from an outsider. I was not raised in a Mormon home. I don't really have any Mormon friends. I've met Mormons. I know Mormons, sure, here and there. I've even seen them in Hanoi, a group of female missionaries, which I thought was odd, women missionaries, but I didn't talk to them, because what am I going to say? Am I just going to repeat everything that I'm saying in this video here? Just look at the history of Mormonism if you want to know that it's not true. And if it doesn't bother you, then go ahead and join, because I mean, it's basically a safe religion. I don't know. They seem to treat each other well. They seem to love each other. They love their community. And in the end, that's pretty much what it's about. I was talking to my younger brother about this once, and he had read the entire Book of Mormon. I've only read about maybe a third of it, but he had read the entire thing, and he said to me, yeah, well, most of the people who are part of it know that it's crap, but they follow it anyway because of the good things that it brings them, which is why it's fun to have just a little bit of mirth to have a prankster put in Obi-Wan Kenobi as Jesus Christ. I think that's kind of cool. And, you know, I just think that religions, of course, they're not exempt from any scrutiny, from any mocking, parody. That religious authority, just like political authority, they deserve to be mocked, and we should totally embrace that, and it shouldn't hurt or offend anyone in the end. We should just have a good chuckle and move on. Over and out.